30 worst gunslingers in the history of Old West. The Old West is filled with legends of quick-draw heroes and fearless lawmen. But what about the ones who missed the mark literally? When we think of gunslingers, we often imagine sharpshooters with nerves of steel. Number 30. John Wesley Harden. John Wesley Harden was born in 1853 in Bonham, Texas, into a family of preachers and teachers. You might think that growing up in a religious household would steer someone away from a life of crime, but that wasn't the case for Harden. From a young age, he had a fierce temper and a knack for finding trouble. By the time he was 14, he had already stabbed a fellow student, and it only got worse from there. Harden's early propensity for violence became his trademark. At just 15, he committed his first murder, killing a former slave during an altercation. This set him on a dark path. Over the next few years, he would kill numerous men, often over trivial disputes. His reputation for being quick on the draw and deadly accurate spread like wildfire. People started to whisper his name with a mixture of fear and awe. One of the most infamous episodes in Harden's life was during the Reconstruction era. He found himself at odds with Union soldiers stationed in Texas, and in typical Harden fashion, he didn't back down. While Harden's story is filled with violence and lawlessness, another gunslinger who left a bloody trail was Jam Miller. Born in 1861 in Arkansas, Jam Miller seemed destined for a life of crime from an early age. By the time Jam was a teenager, his family had moved to Texas, and it wasn't long before Miller's violent tendencies became apparent. At just 17, he was accused of murdering his grandparents, a crime he managed to dodge through a lack of evidence. This dark beginning set the tone for a life steeped in bloodshed and crime. Miller's initial criminal activities were varied. He dabbled in cattle rustling and robbery, but what really set him apart was his willingness to kill for money. Unlike other outlaws who might kill in the heat of the moment or out of necessity, Miller turned murder into a business. He became a notorious contract killer, willing to take out anyone for the right price. This earned him the nickname Killer Miller, and his body count quickly grew. Speaking of ruthless outlaws, Tom Horn Jr.'s life story is equally gripping and filled with dark twists. Number 28. Tom Horn Jr. Tom Horn Jr. is one of those Old West figures whose life reads like a novel filled with adventure, danger, and curiosity. Tom Horn Jr. was born in 1860 in Missouri and quickly proved to be a natural in the rugged, untamed world of the American frontier. He started his career as a scout for the U.S. Army, where his skills in tracking and knowledge of the terrain made him invaluable. His reputation grew, and he soon found himself working as a Pinkerton detective, where he was tasked with hunting down outlaws and cattle rustlers. Being a Pinkerton detective was a prestigious job, but it was also incredibly dangerous. Horn thrived on the danger and developed a fearsome reputation. His time with the Pinkertons was marked by numerous captures and gunfights, but it also planted the seeds for his darker future. After leaving the Pinkerton agency, Horn transitioned into a different line of work, contract killing. From one violent figure to another, the next, Clay Allison's unpredictable and terrifying actions left a lasting impression on the Old West. Number 27. Clay Allison. Clay Allison's post-war activities made him infamous and cemented his legacy as one of the Wild West's most unpredictable and feared gunslingers. After the Civil War, Clay Allison returned to civilian life, but he carried with him the psychological scars and violent tendencies that he had developed during the conflict. He was known for his volatile temper and his readiness to resort to violence at the slightest provocation. One of the most infamous episodes that showcased his erratic nature was when he beheaded a man he suspected of murder. This gruesome act was not just about justice for Allison, it was his display of his willingness to take the law into his own hands and deliver his own brand of retribution. The story goes that Allison confronted the suspected murder, decided that mere killing wasn't enough, and proceeded to decapitate the man. He then carried the severed head into a bar, brandishing it as a trophy and warning to others. This shocking act solidified his reputation as someone you didn't want to cross. It was said that Allison enjoyed intimidating people with his unpredictable behavior, adding to his already fearsome reputation. As we move on from Allison's gruesome acts, the next gunslinger on our list, Billy the Kid, is no less infamous. Number 26. Billy the Kid. Born Henry McCarty around 1859, he became known by several names, but it was his alias, Billy the Kid, that cemented his place in history. His early life was marked by petty crime, but it quickly escalated into a notorious career of theft and murder. Billy's descent into crime began with minor offenses like stealing food and clothing. However, it wasn't long before these petty crimes evolved into more serious transgressions. By the age of 15, he had already committed his first murder, killing a blacksmith during an altercation. This incident set him on a path of lawlessness that would define the rest of his short life. Turning from Billy's notorious escapades, Wild Bill Hickok's life story reads like a thrilling adventure novel. Number 25. Wild Bill Hickok. Wild Bill Hickok is one of those legendary figures from the Old West whose life story seems ripped from the pages of a thrilling adventure novel. Born James Butler Hickok in 1837 in Illinois, he grew up with a love for adventure and the outdoors. His early career was a mix of jobs that suited his restless spirit: stagecoach driver, lawman, and scout. During the Civil War, he even worked as a spy. His talents with a gun and his daring exploits quickly set him apart, turning him into one of the most famous gunslingers of his era. Hickok's rise to fame really began when he took on the role of a lawman. His reputation for bravery and his uncanny accuracy with a pistol were cemented in 1865 during a duel in Springfield, Missouri. The duel with Davis Tutt was classic Wild West, two men standing face to face in the town square, guns drawn. While Wild Bill was a famed lawman, Bass Reeves carved out his own legendary status in the annals of the Old West. Number 24. Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves is a name that stands tall in the annals of the Old West, but not everyone knows his incredible story. Born into slavery in 1839 in Crawford County, Arkansas, Reeves escaped to freedom during the chaos of the Civil War. He fled to Indian Territory, now known as Oklahoma, where he found refuge among the Cherokee, Creek, and Seminole tribes. During his time with them, he learned their languages and customs, skills that would prove invaluable later in his life. After the war, Reeves returned to Arkansas as a free man. It wasn't long before his reputation for honesty and bravery caught the attention of Judge Isaac Parker, the famous hanging judge of the Western District of Arkansas. Transitioning from lawmen to outlaws, Belle Starr's journey into crime is both fascinating and tragic. Number 23. Belle Starr. Known as the Bandit Queen, Belle Starr had a life that reads like a gripping Wild West novel. She was born Myra Mabel Shirley on February 5, 1848, in Carthage, Missouri. Her early life was quite ordinary, but the chaos of the Civil War changed everything for her. Imagine growing up in a relatively well-off family, only to have your world turned upside down by war. It was during this time that Belle started down a path that would eventually make her one of the most infamous women of the Old West. Belle's journey into the world of crime really kicked off when she married Jim Reed in 1866. Jim was a former Confederate guerrilla turned outlaw, and he quickly introduced Belle to his way of life. Together, they were involved in a variety of criminal activities, including robbery and horse theft. This wasn't just a passing phase for Belle, it became her way of life. She was known to be quite the sharpshooter and had a knack for escaping capture, often using her charm and wit to manipulate those around her. As Belle Starr's criminal activities escalate, another figure, Dallas Stoden, made his mark with a deadly reputation. Number 22. Dallas Stoden. Dallas Stoden was one of those larger-than-life figures who seemed to step right out of a Wild West legend. Born in 1845, he saw action as a soldier in the Civil War. Like many veterans after the war, he was looking for a fresh start, and he found it by heading west, where he took on the role of a lawman. Stoden quickly made a name for himself, but it was the 4 dead in 5 seconds gunfight that really cemented his reputation. This legendary shootout took place in April 1881 in El Paso, Texas. The town was a rough place, and tensions were always high. On that fateful El Paso day, a group of Texas Rangers was trying to arrest a troublemaker named John Hale. Things escalated fast and bullets started flying. Stoden, who was the town marshal, jumped into action. In a flash, 4 men were dead, all within the span of 5 seconds. It was a display of quick reflexes and deadly accuracy that left everyone in awe. From that moment on, Stoden was seen as one of the deadliest gunfighters around. Shifting to another notorious outlaw, Harvey Kid Curry Logan's violent career left a bloody legacy. Number 21. Harvey Kid Curry. Harvey Kid Curry Logan was one of the most notorious members of the Wild Bunch, a gang that left a bloody trail across the American West in the late 1800s. Born in 1867 in Tama County, Iowa, Logan's life took a dark turn early on, setting him on a path of crime and violence that would make him one of the most feared outlaws of his time. Kid Curry was known for his involvement in numerous train robberies, which became the Wild Bunch's trademark. Alongside famous outlaws like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Logan participated in a series of high-profile heists. One of their most famous robberies was the 1901 holdup of a Great Northern train near Wagner, Montana. The gang made off with over $60,000, a staggering amount of money at the time. These train robberies were not just about money, though. They were also about the thrill and the challenge, and Logan thrived on the danger. From the notorious Kid Curry, we turn our attention to the flamboyant and deadly Kingfisher. Number 20. Kingfisher. Kingfisher was one of those larger-than-life characters you often hear about when diving into the history of the Old West. Born in 1853 in Texas, he started his life of crime at a pretty young age. By the time he was 16, he was already in and out of trouble, spending time in jail for horse theft and other misdeeds. But it wasn't just his criminal activities that made him famous. It was his colorful personality and flamboyant style. Fisher was known for his flashy dress sense. He often wore brightly colored clothes and was rarely seen without his trademark twin ivory-handled pistols. His appearance alone was enough to make him stand out, but it was his violent reputation that truly set him apart. Kingfisher was involved in numerous gunfights and had a knack for finding himself in the middle of trouble. One of the most notorious incidents was when he single-handedly took on 4 Mexican cowboys, killing them all in a gunfight. This fearless and ruthless behavior cemented his reputation as one of the deadliest gunmen in the West. While Kingfisher was known for his style and violence, Doc Holliday's transformation from dentist to gunslinger is legendary. Number 19. Doc Holliday. Doc Holliday is one of those legendary figures from the Old West whose story feels almost larger than life. Born John Henry Holliday in 1851 in Georgia, he was actually trained as a dentist. He earned his degree from the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery in 1872. But Holliday's life took a dramatic turn when he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, the same disease that had killed his mother. Knowing that his time was limited, he decided to head west, seeking a drier climate that might ease his symptoms. This move marked the beginning of his transformation from a respected dentist to one of the most notorious gamblers and gunfighters of the era. Out west, Holliday's career as a dentist quickly took a back seat to his new profession as a gambler. He became a fixture in the saloons and gambling halls of Texas, Kansas, and Colorado. With his sharp mind and quick reflexes, he earned a reputation as both a skilled card player and a deadly gunman. It was during this period that he became friends with another Old West legend, Wyatt Earp. This friendship would lead Holiday to Tombstone, Arizona, and to one of the most infamous events in the Wild West history. Despite his rough and tumble lifestyle, Holiday's health continued to deteriorate. Transitioning from Holiday's tumultuous life, Wyatt Earp's career as a lawman is equally storied and impactful. Number 18. Wyatt Earp. Wyatt Earp is one of those names that immediately conjures up images of the Wild West. Born in 1848 in Monmouth, Illinois, Wyatt Barry Stapp Earp would go on to become one of the most legendary lawmen and gunfighters of his time. His early years were marked by adventure and hardship as he moved with his family across the Midwest, eventually settling in California during the gold rush. Earp's early career was varied. He tried his hand at farming, stagecoach driving, and even worked as a lawman in small frontier towns. Earp's reputation as a formidable gunfighter really took shape during his time in Dodge City, Kansas, where he served as a deputy marshal. Dodge City was a rough and tumble cattle town, and Wyatt's firm hand and quick draw helped maintain order in a place where disputes were often settled with fists or bullets. His no-nonsense approach earned him respect and fear in equal measure. But it was his move to Tombstone, Arizona, in the late 1870s that would cement his place in Wild West lore. Moving from lawmen to outlaws, Jesse James's life as a notorious robber and folk hero is a tale worth recounting. Number 17. Jesse James. Jesse James is a name that's become synonymous with the Wild West, representing both the daring outlaw and the tragic anti-hero. Born in 1847 in Clay County, Missouri, Jesse Woodson James was destined for a life that would make him a legend. His early years were tumultuous, especially with the Civil War raging during his adolescence. Jesse and his older brother Frank joined the Confederate guerrilla fighters, also known as bushwhackers, and engaged in brutal skirmishes against Union forces. This early exposure to violence and guerrilla tactics set the stage for Jesse's later life as an outlaw. After the war, the James brothers found it difficult to return to a peaceful life. Along with a group of former Confederate guerrillas, they formed the James Younger Gang. This gang quickly gained notoriety for their audacious bank and train robberies. One of their most famous heists occurred in 1869 when they robbed the Daviess County Savings Association in Gallatin, Missouri, a crime that left a bank cashier dead. The gang's boldness knew no bounds. They would often commit robberies in broad daylight, making daring escapes that added to their mystique. Jesse James was not just a criminal, he was a master of public relations. He often wrote letters to newspapers, justifying his actions and portraying himself as a modern-day Robin Hood, stealing from the rich and opposing the oppressive Reconstruction government. This narrative resonated with many Southerners who saw Jesse as a symbol of resistance against Northern aggression. His charismatic and rebellious image turned him into a folk hero, despite the violent realities of his crimes. From Jesse James's daring escapades, Ben Thompson's life was marked by gambling, gunfights, and law enforcement. Number 16. Ben Thompson. Ben Thompson was one of those larger-than-life characters that seem almost too wild to be real. Born in Nottingham, England, in 1843, he moved to Texas with his family as a young boy. From early on, Thompson had a knack for finding trouble and making a name for himself. By his late teens, he was already known as a fearless gambler and a quick draw with a pistol. Thompson's career was as varied as it was dangerous. He started off as a Confederate soldier during the Civil War, which exposed him to the harsh realities of combat and honed his skills with a firearm. After the war, he drifted into gambling, a profession that, at the time, often went hand in hand with gunfighting. Ben Thompson wasn't just a gambler and a gunfighter. He also served as a lawman. He took on the role of city marshal in Austin, Texas, hoping to bring order to the chaotic streets. Surprisingly, he was quite effective in the job, his reputation alone often enough to keep would-be troublemakers in check. Turning from Thompson's varied career, Henry Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid, is another legendary outlaw. Number 15. Henry Longabaugh. Henry Longabaugh, better known as the Sundance Kid, is one of those figures from the Old West whose name evokes images of daring heists and outlaw adventures. Born in Pennsylvania in 1867, Longabaugh's early years were fairly unremarkable until he headed west and his life took a wild turn. Sundance first made a name for himself through petty crimes and horse theft, but it was his partnership with Robert Leroy Parker, famously known as Butch Cassidy, that truly solidified his place in outlaw legend. The two met in the late 1880s, and their chemistry as partners in crime was undeniable. Along with other outlaws, they formed the infamous Wild Bunch Gang, a group that became notorious for its meticulously planned and executed robberies. The Wild Bunch's heists were nothing short of legendary. Their most famous operation was probably the train robbery near Wilcox, Wyoming in 1899. As we move from Sundance's adventures, Butch Cassidy's life of crime and leadership of the Wild Bunch is next on our list. Number 14. Butch Cassidy. Butch Cassidy, whose real name was Robert Leroy Parker, was one of the most legendary figures from the Wild West. Born in 1866 in Beaver, Utah, Cassidy grew up in a Mormon family. Despite his religious upbringing, he gravitated toward a life of crime early on, influenced by his mentor, a cattle rustler named Mike Cassidy, whose last name he adopted as his own. Cassidy's life of crime really took off when he formed the Wild Bunch Gang. This group of outlaws became notorious for their daring bank and train robberies, making them one of the most feared criminal organizations in the American West. The Wild Bunch was a tight-knit group, and their camaraderie was as legendary as their criminal exploits. Members included the Sundance Kid, Harry Longabaugh, Elzie Lay, and others who were equally adept at evading the law. The Wild Bunch pulled off some of the most famous heists of the era. One of their most notable robberies was the Union Pacific train robbery in Wilcox, Wyoming in 1899. Transitioning to another outlaw legend, Sam Bass's journey from businessman to notorious criminal is filled with ambition and tragedy. Number 13. Sam Bass. Sam Bass's journey from a struggling businessman to one of the most notorious outlaws of the Wild West is a tale filled with ambition, daring, and ultimately tragedy. Born on July 21, 1851 in Mitchell, Indiana, Bass faced hardship early on with the death of both parents by the time he was 13. Seeking a better life, he ventured westward, trying his hand at various jobs, including working as a farmhand and a teamster, but nothing seemed to bring him the success he craved. From Sam Bass's tragic tale, Luke Short's life as a gambler and gunfighter is equally thrilling. Number 12. Luke Short. Luke Short's life reads like a classic Wild West tale filled with adventure, danger, and drama. Born in Mississippi in 1854 and raised in Texas, Luke's early years were marked by a variety of occupations. He tried his hand at being a cowboy, whiskey trader, and a professional gambler, but it was his uncanny skill with a gun that truly set him apart. Luke's journey into the world of gunfighting began when he was quite young. He left home and found himself in the rugged lands of Texas, where his quick draw and deadly aim quickly earned him a formidable reputation. His early exploits included numerous skirmishes and shootouts with Native Americans while working for the government, which only added to his growing legend. Shifting focus from Short's exploits, Dan Bogan's fiery temper and violent nature made him a feared gunslinger. Number 11. Dan Bogan. Dan Bogan was one of those characters who seemed to attract trouble wherever he went. Born in 1860, Bogan's early life was marked by a fiery temper and a penchant for violence. Growing up in the rough-and-tumble environment of the American West, he quickly developed a reputation as a hot-headed troublemaker who was always ready for a fight. By 1886, Dan Bogan had already claimed the lives of 3 men. His quick temper and even quicker trigger finger made him both feared and notorious. But it was his infamous killing of Constable Charles S. Gunn that truly cemented his place in the annals of Old West outlaws. Moving from Bogan's notorious deeds, Johnny Ringo's enigmatic and deadly reputation is a story worth exploring. Number 10. Johnny Ringo. Johnny Ringo was as enigmatic as he was deadly. Known for his involvement with the Clanton gang, Ringo was a feared gunfighter whose name struck fear into the hearts of many. His most notorious act was his participation in the events leading up to the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. Despite his fearsome reputation, Ringo's death remains a mystery, with some believing he took his own life, while others suspect foul play. As we delve into Ringo's dark past, Bill Dulan's leadership of the Dulan-Dalton gang adds another layer to our list of infamous outlaws. Number 9. Bill Dulan. Bill Dulan was a true outlaw legend. As the leader of the Dulan-Dalton gang, he orchestrated numerous bank and train robberies across the American West. Dulan's gang became known for their brazen heists and ability to evade capture, making them a thorn in the side of lawmen. His criminal career came to an end when he was finally gunned down by Deputy U.S. Marshal Heck Thomas in 1896. Transitioning from Dulan's criminal exploits, Black Bart's unique approach to stagecoach robbery stands out in Wild West history. Number 8. Black Bart. You know, unlike many of his rough-and-tumble contemporaries, Black Bart was a totally different kind of outlaw. His real name was Charles E. Bowles, but he earned his nickname because he wasn't your typical violent bandit. Black Bart was actually quite the gentleman stagecoach robber. He had this quirky habit of leaving poetic messages at the scene of his crimes, which is pretty wild, right? This guy managed to pull off 28 stagecoach robberies without ever firing a single shot. Can you believe that? He was always polite and never harmed anyone. It's almost like he had a code of honor or something. But eventually his luck ran out. In 1883, he was finally caught because he left behind a handkerchief with a laundry mark on it. That tiny mistake led to his downfall. It's just fascinating how someone like Black Bart operated with such a unique style in an era known for its brutality and violence. It's like he had his own set of rules and stuck to them, making him one of the most intriguing figures of the Wild West. From Black Bart's poetic heists, Tom and Frank McClary's involvement in the gunfight at the OK Corral adds to the legend. Number 7. Tom McClary and Frank McClary. So, let me tell you about the McClary brothers, Tom and Frank. These guys were right in the thick of things leading up to the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. They were pretty notorious, hanging out with a Clanton gang and getting involved in all sorts of outlaw activities, like cattle rustling. You can imagine the kind of trouble they stirred up in those days. The McClarys and the Clantons were kind of a big deal in the Wild West outlaw scene, always pushing the limits and causing chaos. But their run came to a dramatic end in Tombstone, Arizona. The brothers found themselves facing off against the Earp brothers and Doc Holliday in what became one of the most famous shootouts in history. During that epic gunfight at the OK Corral, Tom and Frank McClary met their fate. The Earps and Doc Holliday were determined to bring some law and order to Tombstone, and unfortunately for the McClarys, they were on the wrong side of that showdown. It's such a classic tale of the Wild West, with these larger-than-life characters clashing in a final deadly confrontation. Moving from the McClary brothers, Curly Bill Broches' violent temper and clashes with the Earps are next in line. Number 6. Curly Bill Broches. You have to hear about Curly Bill Broches, one of the most notorious outlaws of the Wild West. He was the leader of the Cowboys, a gang of rustlers and robbers that caused all kinds of trouble back then. Curly Bill had his violent temper that made him even more infamous. People say he was involved in the shooting of Marshal Fred White in Tombstone, which really put him on the map as a dangerous man. the stories about his run-ins with the Earp brothers are the stuff of legend. The tension between Curly Bill and the Earps was always high, leading to some intense and dramatic confrontations. This guy was not someone you'd want to mess with, but the Earps weren't exactly backing down either. Curly Bill's wild ride eventually came to an end in 1882. He met his fate in a shootout with Wyatt Earp near Iron Springs. It was a fitting dramatic end for such a notorious figure. The Wild West was full of characters like Curly Bill, but he definitely stood out as one of the most memorable outlaws, leaving behind a legacy of chaos and conflict. Shifting from Curly Bill's notorious acts, Ike Clanton's cowardice and continuous life of crime paint a different picture of an outlaw. Number 5. Ike Clanton. Ike Clanton was one of the key antagonists in the lead-up to the gunfight at the OK Corral. Known for his cowardice and bluster, Ike managed to avoid being shot in the famous gunfight by running away. Despite his attempts to portray himself as a victim, he continued his life of crime until he was killed in a gunfight with lawmen in 1887. As we move from Ike Clanton's story, Billy Claiborne's involvement in Tombstone's events and ultimate fate add another layer to our narrative. Number 4. Billy Claiborne. Billy Claiborne was another figure involved in the events of Tombstone. He survived the gunfight at the OK Corral by fleeing the scene, but continued his life as a cowboy and outlaw. Claiborne's life was cut short in 1882 when he was killed in a shootout by gunfighter Franklin Leslie. Transitioning from Claiborne's life, Bill Longley's ruthless nature and violent streak left a legacy of terror. Number 3. Bill Longley. Bill Longley was a notorious gunslinger known for his ruthless nature and quick temper. His life of crime included numerous murders, often committed with little provocation. Longley's violent streak eventually caught up with him, and he was captured and hanged in 1878, leaving behind a legacy of bloodshed and terror. From Longley's bloody trail, buckskin Frank Leslie's sharpshooting skills and deadly encounters solidify his place on our list. Number 2. Buckskin Frank Leslie. Buckskin Frank Leslie was a multifaceted figure known for his sharpshooting skills, gambling, and participation in several notable gunfights. After killing Billy Claiborne in 1882, Leslie's reputation as a deadly gunslinger was cemented. Despite his deadly skills, his life took a downward spiral, and he ended up serving time for murder before fading into obscurity. Wrapping up our list, John Wesley Hardin's violent lifestyle and ultimate demise encapsulate the dangerous allure of the Old West. Number 1. John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin was one of the most notorious gunslingers in the Old West. Known for his quick temper and lethal skills, Hardin claimed to have killed 42 men, though the actual number is debated. His violent lifestyle eventually led to his capture and imprisonment. After serving time, he attempted to live a quieter life, but was ultimately gunned down in 1895, cementing his legacy as one of the West's deadliest outlaws. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.